Hi everyone, welcome back to Creatively Crafted Life. This is Melanie and I have with me yet again, Lela.
Hey.
Hi Lela, how are you?
Good. It's a little bit cold up where I am. Tonight I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I think it's like 12 degrees. So it's a little bit chilly here.
I won't tell you how nice and beautiful it is here.
I figured that's what I thought I would tell you. Yeah. This is definitely not where you want to come at the end or the beginning of May or March, end of February. It's still pretty chilly here. It's supposed to be tomorrow. I think it's supposed to hit a high of 20. Perfect weather to stay in and craft. I was thinking that as I was here, I was like, if I lived here, I would not go outside. It's really cold.
Very true. And so how appropriate that we're going to talk about stamping, right, tonight?
Absolutely.
So for those of you that didn't see our last video, we actually announced that we will be hosting another event here at the end of March. So it'll be March 25th and 26th, I believe. Similar to our last one, it'll be a Friday evening and then followed by sometime on Saturday. And we're doing a bunch of lead up videos like last time.
Glad to be here again. That was fun. And I'm looking forward to this one too. I think we have a kind of a fun idea to explore.
Yeah, speaking of that, our theme is
something old, something new.
Something borrowed and something colorful. Yeah, blue, red, green, purple.
Yeah.
And like last time, we picked an item from the Close to My Heart catalog that's currently out, actually just out.
Yes, yeah. March 1st.
And this time, instead of doing a scrapbook kit, we've chosen to stamp images. So I will insert a picture here of both images. The first one is Thoughtful Florals, which is a floral stamp set with a couple greetings. And the other one is Slimline Quotes and Sentiments. And it's basically exactly what it says.
I think the whole thought process behind our theme, and maybe we could explain that a little bit, was as you and I were talking about, you just finished it February, right? And trying to use up some of the things we had. The whole thought process that we had to use these stamp sets was to take something new, if you will, stamp sets, but go ahead and pull out some of the things we already had, or, in our stash, or something old, if you will, or older, and try to use something new that helps us use up something old, right? Does that make sense? And our whole thought process was to take these stamp sets and really see what we could do with some of the other things we had already in our crafting stash.
Absolutely. And I mean, everybody loves something new, right? It's exciting. But yet we do have some old favorites in our stash that we just, don't always feel like we have time to pull out. So what better opportunity than to deliberately combine the two? So our first challenge was to pull out those stencils. So they're a great inexpensive tool that I'm sure many of us have. I know I have plenty in my stash. And how can we incorporate that with a new stamp set?
Mm-hmm. I even thought about, Melanie, I have plenty of stencils to use, so I was excited to get those out. But also just using the negative space from, a Cricut cut or a die cut, silhouette or Cricut, or, however you cut, and you could, even use like the negative space for that. And I don't always do that. And sometimes I'm looking for that little bit of added touch, right? Where maybe a printed piece of paper is a little bit much, or I can't find exactly the color I'm looking for. And every time I pull out my stencils, I say that to myself. I'm like, Lela, you have these stencils, you know what I mean? They would work perfect for a background, for just a touch of a background, whether you want color or dimension or texture. And yeah, the next time I usually go hunting through my paper stash. So it was really fun to think about all the things you could do with stencils and all the ways you could take a stencil, right, and make like a different background, or to try to help you use up some other things, or use some things that you maybe your favorites and you just wanted to play along. So
Yeah, absolutely. I had tossed a few ideas around as well for using stencils. And one of them was actually just to use plain cardstock and add ink in a similar color with a stencil to turn that basically into a tone on tone paper. Now, I didn't do that, but it's something that I filed away to try because I don't know about you, but I have a ton of solid cardstock. And, it's been on my mind that I need to use it a little bit more. But because I normally gravitate towards printed cardstock, it's something that, tweaked my interest in pursuing. So who knows, maybe before the event, I will come up with a project that does tone on tone with.
I actually have a couple. I did the texture paste, right? So I've got that texture paste, and it really was a great way to add just a little bit of dimension, but to your point, just keep it tone on tone. So I'll be anxious to see what you do.
Who knows though, the way our schedules have been. Finding time to craft this last month has been a little bit tricky, but
right. And you know what, that's a really good point, right? So we both love to craft, and it kind of helps keep our sanity, and yet there are times, right, where your life, right, catches up with you, and it has for both of us, both being busy with some job things going on. And I think this is just such a fun thing to look forward to our March event, because we've both been, kind of a little bit of a crazy schedule, and what a nice thing to look forward to. Yeah, so I'm sure there are other people who feel like us, Mel, right? Like something's going on or something's crazy, and it's just fun to let your mind wander. And I hope everybody crafts along with us, because, whatever you choose to do, in your crafting world, I think that it brings a little bit of sanity.
Absolutely. And of course, if you do play along, we'd love to see what you came up with. And so both of us have Facebook groups that you're more than welcome to join, one, both, or either. It's also where we will post all the information about the event, just to keep you guys all informed. That being said, if you are not a Facebook fan but still want to participate, of course, we will include you. We will just send you the links to the different sessions when we get closer, so that you can still participate.
Pretty excited about that, because, you just mentioned the sessions we're going to have. They are going to be on Zoom. So if you're not a Facebook fan, like we did last time, it's fun. People can still join us through Zoom. And we talked about having, in those sessions, kind of using or talking about some of the things we've used or played with. So it'll be fun to have that session and hear what everybody has to think about some of these different tools and options, and items that we've used.
So speaking of items that we used, how about we share what projects we made for this week's challenge? Now I made 2 and you made 1. So why don't I go first, and then we'll go flip over to you and then come back to me, and we'll just play off that way. So the first project that I made was a card. And I actually used some very old stencils in my stash. The first one is this tag stencil. I don't know if you can see this very clearly. So this is probably circa 1995.
I was gonna say, wow, you really dug out an old one there.
Yep, this was back in the day before we had die cuts or punch. Well, I mean, there were a few punches, but they were pretty small. We didn't have like a silhouette or a Cricut or anything like that. And so I had bought this stencil so I could make my own tags, basically tracing them out and cutting them. And I hung on to it all this time. And I thought what I would do is play off of the idea of layered stencils that they have. It's all the rage right now, especially with certain companies like Pink Fresh, where they give you the stencils to build an image. Well, I'm saying you can do layered stencils without having these fancy stencils out there. If you take something like the tag, that's a big wide open space, and layer another stencil on top. And so for that one, I took a triangle stencil. See that there? Hopefully not too much glare. This is probably about 10 years old as well. So I feel very proud of myself for having used them.
And but think about how things come around and go. Like triangles are kind of really popular right now. So it's kind of cool that you found that stencil in your stash and pull it back out.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I first started scrapbooking way back in the day, the very first tool I bought were stencils. And they were from Creative Memories. They were circles and ovals. And I got rid of them. And there's a couple of times where I thought back, I'm like, now that stencils are all the rage, I'm like, oh, they would have been perfect. Not necessarily for what I used them for back then, but just, to ink in a stencil or apply paste or whatever. So for my layering, I actually took some glitter paste. I had some in my stash. I don't even remember what it was from, Bo Bunny, I think. But you could make your own glitter paste just with regular texture paste that Creative Memory sells. I think you guys sell the Ranger texture paste, is that correct?
Close to my heart. Yeah, close to my heart. So
yeah, and then just add some glitter to it yourselves, or apply the paste and just pour glitter on top, and you get a very similar effect. And so that was my something old, and my something new, of course, is a stamp set. And I am calling my something borrowed. Now, not all of my cards have this, but in this case it did. I borrowed the color scheme from a Pink Fresh paper pad. I was like, what colors should I make the flowers and that kind of thing. And so I actually pulled some paper from a 6x6 paper pad that I've had for a few years. So that's also something old that I managed to use up. I colored in the image using colored pencils, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it's funny when you pull out some of those old things that you haven't played with for a while, right? You're like, oh my gosh, why haven't I? You kind of think that through, and then you play with it for a little while, and then you move on to something else. So it was pretty fun to try to think through some of these things we've had.
I think my biggest problem with a lot of this kind of mixed media stuff is that there's often dry time involved, or there's some sort of mess, that you got to clean up afterwards. And so it's not that it's off-putting because I enjoy doing it, but it's like I have to be in the right frame of mind and the right mental state to do it. So in some ways, I almost think it would be better if I'd made a whole bunch of cardstock panels with texture paste and just had them in my stash. So I make that mess once and clean up, and then I'm good. But I haven't done that yet. It's just something I've been
and it dries, to your point, it dries, right? And then you could, that way, when you did want to do it, again, you're not waiting for something to good point.
Yeah. So you also made a card.
I did make a card. I started with a page as well, and you'll definitely see that in some of the artwork that we're going to share. But tonight, obviously traveling, it's a little bit limited what I could bring along and still have it look halfway decent, but I made a card. So I used a stenciled panel, and I used some inks, and just kind of inked the stencil.
What kind of stencil is that? What kind of stencil did you use on that one?
Just a card stencil, close to my heart. Yep, close to my heart stencil. And I just ripped it. And the thing that really made me think about this was sometimes I'm looking for, a certain color I want to use, or something that's really not going to draw away from my project. And I tend to sort through my paper forever, right? Looking for that perfect paper. And as I was stenciling these, and I stenciled 2 or 3 different color backgrounds, and you'll see those as well coming up in some other artwork, it really reminded me how flexible this was, Mel. Like I could pick the color I wanted, and I did it, in this card, I wanted something a little bit soft, and it was perfect. It gave it just enough color on the cardstock to and design where it didn't take away from the rest of the card that I made. So
you it actually adds another layer. So if you had just a plain piece of like white cardstock, which would still be striking, this just adds an extra layer of interest on top of it. It's very cool.
I thought so too. Yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. I used the Slimline card, as you can tell, it's a little bit longer card. So that was pretty fun. I liked the panel. I liked it ripped. My something old was, I found this old roll of black gingham ribbon. I don't even know where I got it or how long I've had it, but it's one of those ribbons, and I'm sure you have it too, where I pick it up all the time to use it, right? And I put it down and I don't, right? It either doesn't work, or right. I probably have used it and just not used a lot. And I'm like, I am laying this right here on the desk, and I'm going to play with this ribbon. And so I like ribbon. I like ribbon on cards, and it was kind of fun to incorporate the ribbon. And then I layered my used dimensionals on my flowers. So I cut them out and added some of the shimmer brush. So they're kind of sparkly. And that was kind of fun to do too, was to pull out those shimmer brushes. Again, they sit right on my desk, and I don't always use them, but they add just a touch of shimmer on the flowers. I colored my flowers with the tri-blend markers. So Close to My Heart does sell the Spectrum Noir tri-blends, and if you've never used them, they're awesome. And I'll tell you that for people like me, I think they're awesome because I'm not always really good with blending or figuring out what colors to blend. So having the 3 colors that go together right in one pen makes even someone like me be able to, do the different shading and the different colors because all the colors are right in one.
I noticed you, like me, trimmed our images out. So the stamp set doesn't come with a die, but we did both fussy cut them out. And just before we got on the call, we were talking about, did we like the image, the way it was presented by Close to My Heart, which was the 2 large floral pieces are connected. So I will include a picture here again of the stamp set so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. And we both had the same idea.
Yeah, we both said that it was a little bit clunky, right, or hard to use because it was really pretty floral. But it seemed to be like I only used half of it in this, as you can see here, and then 2 of the littler flowers. And so I definitely am going to be cutting that apart. It will fit on a block better, a stamping block, and I like to use, a little smaller stamping box, although I have a Misty and, it worked there as well. But I just think for me, I can always, stamp the images together if I want them together, but I don't see myself using it as all one image. And I think you said the same thing.
And that's something that further to our theme of using stuff in your stash. If you have something that just doesn't seem to work the way that it is presented, think about ways that you can change it or make it work for you. So in this case, a photopolymer stamp set can be easily trimmed with just a regular pair of scissors. Stamps don't scream when they get cut, so you don't have to worry about hurting it.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really, really good point, Melanie, because how many things do we probably have in our stash? And I could probably give you a list, and you probably could give me a list of there's just something that makes us go, I don't know if I'm going to use that, right? But if you do what you said, like make it work, whatever you have to do, or tweak it a little bit, and like this case, I think we are going to enjoy those stamp sets as two stamps versus 1. And that's a really great point. We'd probably use them a lot more that way when we, figure out a way to make it work.
Okay, and so then the other project that I created for this week is actually a scrapbook layout. And I'm going to include a picture here, a still picture. Hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit better than on the video. So I took a really large stencil and I used just white texture paste on a white cardstock background. So it's very, very subtle. But when you're looking at it in real life, you can see the texture and it just kind of fills in the space on the left-hand side of the photo, which I really like. And then I stamped out the image multiple times and trimmed them out. I did a lot of fussy cutting. Let's just put it this way.
I was just going to say this was not too bad of a stamp to fussy cut. So that's another thing sometimes I don't always do, but I really liked your page and how you fussy cut it to use it multiple times. That looks really great.
And I liked having all the little pieces with it. So that it comes with little flowers, little extras that you can tuck in. And it just helped fill out the bottom part of my layout. I was quite happy with it. I used the same color scheme from the Pink Fresh paper pad. And I also used some paper from there. Again, just trying to use up some of my stash. And I mean, I got a lot of 6x6 paper pads and I swear they multiply overnight. I use one sheet and there's 5 more that replace them. I did use some dimensionals on the stamped images as well to kind of just, make it a little bit more interesting. Overall, the page is pretty simplistic, but I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Melanie, sometimes I struggle with white space. And so what I really think is really great about your page is you took that stencil and you still have white space, if you will, there, but you've got some texture. And I just think that's really cool. That looks really great.
Thank you. It was fun. It was fun. I do want to make a point now, though, to have, after this, have my stencils a little more readily available, which was the whole point of this, right? Like to rejuvenate our stash and to feel more excited about what we have and go from there. So who knows, maybe I will be using stencils on everything in the next little while.
There you go. I think that sometimes I get so caught up in a pattern that I don't, maybe think about using something a different way. So on my card, I just want to mention that is I really started out to use the Slimline card for the stamps we got, right, which were the Slimline sentiments. And once I had the card put together, I just couldn't make it work. And normally I probably would have truthfully probably tossed the card into this box I have of these half done cards, that something doesn't go right. And but I'm like, well, I really like the stencil and that's the whole use. So I just took, as you can see, the sentiment from the floral stamp, the thank you sentiment is just one, and then did it multiple ways down the side of the card.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic use of that little stamp. You would never think to just look at it that it's a single small little image. I actually used the same image on mine, but just as the single thank you, and it looks completely different. So that's another thing, again, to our point, go and look at your stuff and can you use it in a slightly different way than what's expected to get more use out of it.
Right. I really liked it. It came out right how I wanted, I really wanted to use that, or I had thought originally to start out was to use the Slimline sentiments, but it ended up that it didn't quite fit with what I was looking for with the floral, and I really ended up liking the flowers, so it kind of got voted out.
There you go. And I like that you went off. I like that you went off the page as well. That's one of the things I think I remember learning when I first started stamping, was that if you do any stamped background or anything, always make sure you stamp off the page. Our instincts is to keep it within the edges, but it looks more natural when it goes off, because if you think of patterned paper, it never, like pre-printed patterned paper, it never has, or not never, it rarely has clean lines. The images always extend off.
Right. And that's what I thought it ended up looking kind of cool, is to maybe not stamp it all the way across.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In different lengths.
Yeah.
Just to give it again a little bit of that jagged look to go with the florals.
Okay, so that is it for this week's challenge. We hope that you are inspired. We'd love to hear your story behind some of the items in your stash that perhaps you pulled out as a result of us challenging you. Specifically, we're focusing on stencils, but of course, if you pull something else out because it inspires you, by all means, we're still interested in hearing. And as Lela has suggested, if you don't have stencils, you can always make your own using the negative spaces from punches or die cuts. And we really would like to see how creative you get with this challenge.
I'm really curious to hear, because I think that some of these things that we're going to talk about, and even you and I said, is like you mentioned, your stencils are a little bit older that were in your stash. This stencil I've had for a little while as well. I've probably only used it a couple times. And I think stencils are one of those things where they were a little bit popular a while ago. We probably all have them or something like that in our stash. And, now to go back and get it back out was pretty fun. And I do think that having it a little bit more accessible. Stencils are one of those things where they're easy, and I kind of shoved them back in a little, back corner of my closet. And so I don't pull them out as often. So I've actually even moved them closer to my desk. and made them a little bit more accessible, because I do think that there's a lot of great ways. We talked about 2 or 3 here, with the stencil paste or the glitter paste, inks. There's so many different ways to use our stencils, right? Even, stenciling on some doodling or, whatever floats your boat. So I will be really anxious to hear even the conversation about, do you have stencils? How long have you had them? And when's the last time you used them?
So yes, I will leave all the information below regarding our Facebook groups. Again, like I said, feel free to join one, both, either. We would love to see you over there, and be sure to leave a comment either below in the video or in the Facebook group. And we hope you will consider joining us on March 25th and 26th. And I think that is going to be it for this week. Stay tuned for next week, as we're going to bring you another challenge. And do we give them a hint as to what it's going to be?
Absolutely.
So think embossing.
Right. We're going to talk about embossing.
Yeah. And we can go in many directions with that. So until next time, happy crafting.